Greetings, everyone. Lisa here. If you go to sleep at night and you feel like you've done something, more than likely you have. We consider that you work for the army of the Lord or you're working for the army of the bad guys. Either way, I'm speaking to you. These theorems are based on Dolores Cannon's work, reading my Bible, and my own personal experiences. This channel is not for everybody. This is explicitly for the people who know they operate in the dream time, and that is like when you get beyond the stage of meditation and you don't have those thoughts running through, and your mind quiets down when you start can see in your third eye whilst meditating or while awake. You're operating in the dream time. We're going to go through chapter, which chapter is this? 7, in the wilderness of the HAARP. Before I begin, I have a few card messages for the end. I pulled cards late last night. One of the messages was for the collective. But after I read the chapter, Spirit wanted me to tell you about other things that the people I said had access to the axiom can do. And then they want me to explain how things sound like, what the ET guides sound like, what the angels sound like, and what some of us that are quantumly connected sound like. And they wanted me to talk about how people project and diction. So I have a little bit of personal information to share with those of you who are going through some of the same stuff. Okay. Happy Thursday, by the way. Chapter 7, in the wilderness. The log home sits in a clearing in one of the small timber stands. Oh, and by the way, before I get too carried away in this, they are working on the apartment next door. So if sound happens, I'm just going to try to talk through it. The log home sits in a clearing in one of the small timber stands, which carpet much of Alaska, the largely silent tracts of spruce called the bush. The small house is within hailing distance of a 2-lane paved road. On the February day that Nick Begich and Jean Manning visited, the remains of a moose carcass dominated the driveway. Stepping around a snowmobile parked beside the house, the burly owner offered a warm handshake. Wally wore a National Rifle Association baseball cap, plaid flannel shirt over sweatpants, unzipped snow boots, and a brief smile of welcome. Up to this moment, the two writers knew of him only as a man of diverse skills, from trucking to wildlife management. He spent up to $500 a month on phone bills to oppose HAARP. Inside the family home, Parkers and boots were shed in the kitchen. Then the trio moved into a larger room. The wooden table that they settled around held a Mac computer with modem and printer. At the far end of the room, a large TV screen dominated a seating area that faced a wood-burning furnace. Peeled pine logs supported the ceiling. As he turned off the television, Wally commented on how life in the bush had changed in only 20 years. A satellite receiving dish in his backyard collected a world of communication channel signals out of the sky. He often tuned in news from Australia and New Zealand. Cabin-bound months in the winter give bush dwellers time for shortwave radio as well as reading. He noted, with all this and the internet too, they could become better informed than some city dwellers. However, he did not find all the news reassuring. He paced nervously on wool-stockinged feet and then suggested his guests climb into his four-wheel drive truck for a drive to the HAARP site near Gakona. On the way, they could ask him questions. Wally recalled how he stumbled into the HAARP controversy through forestry firefighting courses. He had previously known one of the other protesters from the bush country, whom he referred to as Ed. Wally recognized the man's name under letters to the local newspaper, the Copper River Journal, and to the Anchorage Daily News. Of most concern to these local activists were HAARP documents that clearly stated the project was intended to find out how the ionosphere could be exploited for military purposes. It was not pure auroral research. They were also suspicious of HAARP environmental impact statement that said there would be no impact on climate, the ozone layer, or weather. As Wally talked about his reluctance to get involved in the No HAARP campaign, Jean Ann Manning remembered a 1994 letter from a northern homesteader who ran a mail-order business. She carried the letter in her pocket with the intention of phoning the writer while in the north. Most Alaskans are anti-environmentalists, Howard wrote. It has something to do with the frontier mentality and the fact that almost all of our money comes from the oil industry and other mineral extraction. He then zeroed in on HAARP. The EIS and various Department of Air Force press releases have disingenuously pictured the project as a swell international research project where, in a really sappy detail, even local high school students would be free to use the facility to conduct science project research on the aurora borealis. Of course, the project is pure Star Wars, aimed at enhancing the ability to disrupt enemy communications by disturbing the ionosphere. According to what I know from Valiant Thor, the HAARP is only supposed to be used for communication, and it was to help communication from Earth to space. Two main groups opposed HAARP, he said: trappers, miners, and others in the bush who rely on ham radio communications because they have no telephone service, and pilots. I'm sure the military planners, as do most Americans, consider Alaska to be empty enough that a trapper here or there, or an unlucky bird, would be of minor consequence, and were perhaps surprised by the volume of local opposition. There's a notation, number 65. The guys in the bush have been giving pseudonyms in this book at the suggestion of the three of them who are concerned about keeping low profiles in their communities. Wally and Nick were chatting as the vehicle bucked along into a white landscape with occasional glimpses of black asphalt ahead. The discussion returned to HAARP because his background included computers and government contracts. Wally had looked into getting work with APTI, which held the contract to build HAARP at the time. The effort to get the jobs went nowhere, but Wally had a look at the HAARP contract. I saw the site had to be open for inspection according to Intermediate Nuclear Defense Force Treaty or something. Saw a number of things in provisions of the contract. The way information was handled didn't add up. Everything had to go through John Heckscher. HAARP project manager in Massachusetts. People here locally didn't know anything. The further we dug after we had a look at the contract, we knew it was a secret project. There was hokey pokey going on that the government didn't want to disclose. There were provisions in the contract that tripped my bells. Contractors can't disclose if there's something injurious, clauses like that. Clauses like that. Wally said he had then telephoned two men who publicly opposed HAARP. Claire Zucker, who was at the time still an accountant with ARCO in Anchorage, told Wally that for environmental reasons, Claire wanted to see the site shut down. Ed agreed and added that a ham operator he had concerns about whether the high-power RF beaming would interfere with life and death situations in the bush. Ed prodded me into doing computer searches on the internet. Go into the Library of Congress and different databases. As soon as I started looking stuff up, that was all she wrote. Eventually, some of us formed a network. Some of the people were concerned about possible military applications of a technology that could knock out the internet or black out the power grid. More close at hand, they figured what goes up must come down, especially if radiations bounce off the ionosphere. Wally worried when he heard talk of the HAARP technicians planning to install filters on the radio and satellite receiving dishes in and around every home in the vicinity. The filters would screen out incoming radio wave interference, he was told. He got together with an electronics whiz who lived on an even more remote homestead to study the proposal for high-powered beaming. Concerned about their family's health, they came to a conclusion: it's not innocuous. Excuse me. Nor was the proposed violation of Earth's atmospherical electrical system. He said, you read about a tremendous heated plume rising and raising part of the upper atmosphere with it, and then it could change weather conditions, and that the actual effects can be intensified. Then HAARP spokesman come back and say, don't worry. He did worry about his family on the ground receiving reflected radiation. We all should. And then about swans, duck, geese, and other frequent flyers that could be fried in the intense radio frequency beam above the project site. The ionospheric heater, as the HAARP antenna was called, would beam upward in a prime corridor for migrating waterfowl. Another of the guys in the bush worried that migrating salmon might lose their way, as they used geomagnetic field as part of their roadmap for returning to spawning grounds. The magnetically sensitive material, magnetite, had been found in salmon as it had in human brains. Therefore, changes in magnetic field would be confusing, he said. A powerful ionospheric heater such as HAARP could create an artificial electromagnetic storm high above the earth. I just want to add in there's been more and more incidents of autism, and it is an effect of the ionospheric heating because magnetics is involved and gravity. All we have is John Heckscher comments that there'll be no more magnetic disturbances than what occurs naturally, Wally said skeptically. The bush dwellers and their science advisors, on the other hand, contended that even naturally occurring disturbances caused by solar storms do disrupt living systems. A psychologist at the University of Alaska did a study trying to connect Alaska's high rate of suicides to the disturbances from geomagnetic storms generated by the aurora borealis. There's a reference 66. Vancouver Province newspaper, Electric Impulse, April 4, 1995. And scientific articles about the sensitivities of living cells and nervous systems said it doesn't take strong magnetic fields to make a difference. Fluctuations of very weak fields can dramatically affect the cellular level of life. Leaning against the passenger side of the window of the truck, Nick nodded agreement with the no HAARP researcher. His years of research had uncovered studies and proved this point. As his pickup truck swayed in the strong gusts of snow driving wind, Wally recalled the early days of their battle. We tried to find ways to bring it to the public's attention, but the newspapers just blocked the thing out. They didn't want to deal with it. We thought we had a good contact with a large Alaskan newspaper, but the reporter told me the story was being squashed. The loose network of activists try to keep up their momentum despite the lack of publicity. We had our meetings by conference call. Seemed like every turn we turn around, we were bringing up new information. Joe knew a lot about this directed weapon stuff. Ed, on the other hand, knew the technical and very well. He performed all the calculations on his computer, and his calculations didn't jive with the reports put out by MITRE Corporation. Wally glanced over to see if his listeners were paying attention to this part of the story. MITRE Corporation does all the work for NSA, National Security Agency. They're NSA owned, operated, signed, sealed, and delivered. MITRE Corporation is the main defense communications contractor for the United States government. Another bell goes off. What are we talking about here? Satellite communications, ASAT, satellite, weapon, or what? Members of the rural No HAARP group research different aspects of the puzzle, each taking a different slant. They never sat down together in the same room, but collaborated long distances. Wally met Claire Zucker once in Anchorage and received copies of documents that Claire had dug out of the library. When Wally returned home to his computer, he filed a whopping big request for more information on HAARP. I thought it was going to be Heckscher, but it was forwarded to Kirtland Air Force Base. When that happened, I remembered that Kirtland hosts the Air Force Space Command, and it also stores atomic weapons. And they do the black, hidden budget stuff for Los Alamos. It shocked the hell out of me that my request came back from Kirtland Air Force Base. Then I knew this project probably has a lot of classified stuff. Wally's brow creased in an anxious frown. You're gut-checking yourself all along the way. Am I damaging national security? Ed and I, a lot of times, would kick this back and forth on the phone, always second-guessing what we're doing. Despite their desire to be patriotic, he said it always came back to a gut feeling that they were correct in opposing HAARP. So they spared no expense. Wally estimated the few individuals spent between $5,000 and $10,000 on photocopying and mailings of information packets. The last package we did with Claire went to a writer in New York who was from a national environmental news service. Said he could do a good job. I drove all the way into town and sent this stuff out to him FedEx. Yeah, it's a 7 or 8 hour round trip. How do you determine the cost of our time? Excuse me. As he casually steered through waves of snow drifting across the road, Wally recalled the meeting which he and Ed had in the city of Fairbanks with Paul Bourdieu, the author of books such as The Zapping of America. He told us about a situation where a community put up a stand against a proposed project, but their protest never panned out. The people even got injunctions, but the Air Force never gave in. It was about a similar type of system where it could be increased incrementally. He told us about the hazards involved in HAARP. Wally steered off the road and onto a plowed driveway. The locked gate of the fence stopped the truck, and signs hung on the wire mesh warned that the three were looking at a controlled area. It is unlawful to enter this area without permission of the installation commander, Section 21, Internal Security Act of 1950, USC 797. While on this installation, all personnel and the property under their control are subject to search. A black no trespassing sign hung beside one of the warnings. The trio jumped out of the truck to survey the site from which the antenna would zap the upper reaches of the sky with more power than the human race had previously been able to throw. Beyond a line of spruce, a box-like building appeared to be about the size of an industrial warehouse or grain elevator, loomed between them and the gravel pad base for the antenna. Manning remembered that Claire Zucker once came up with a melodramatic name for the innocuous appearing installation, the monster in the wilderness. She also recalled that a scientist from Princeton, New Jersey, Dr. Richard Williams of the David Sarnoff Research Laboratory, coined a simpler name for HAARP type ionospheric heaters, skybusters. He said high-energy experiments pose a danger to the upper atmosphere and could cause irreversible damage in a short time. Effects could spread around the globe. What we do know, the physicist had added, is that secrecy always lowers the standards of environmental accountability. In the cautious manner of a scientist, William had taken his concerns to the Journal of Physics and Society instead of to the mass media. An equally polite reply printed in the next issue came from Caroline Herzenberg of Argonne National Laboratory, who wrote as a private individual in 1988 and again in April of 1994. She warned that the advanced type of ionospheric heater could be used as a weapons system, and its use might violate the Environmental Modification Convention ratified by the United States in 1979. The atmosphere, ionosphere, and near-Earth space are included in the convention. Herzenberg called on the physics community to closely critique the HAARP technology. The analysis hasn't been done. Manning shot a photograph excuse me, of Nick shivering in the February wind. You could tell they don't want me to talk about this. And this started after last night's video, by the way. Manning shot a photograph of Nick shivering in the February wind, but Wally did not want to be photographed. They joked half-heartedly about climbing over the fence and getting arrested. Clambering back into the cab of the pickup felt like a better idea. On the drive back, Wally said he doubted if there would be the vaunted economic benefits to locals from money spent by contractors who come in to complete the site. It's a short-term deal, 1 summer, 2 summers, and the construction jobs are out of here. We were sold a bill of goods. They said there would be a lot of spin-offs, visiting scientists, but in the contract it states that this facility is built to be remotely operated. Remotely operated? The only person that's going to make out here is the fuel oil dealer from the millions of gallons of fuel that'll be burnt here. They sold us a lot of bullshit. There were long silences on the ride back, as if all three were reflecting on how down-to-earth concerns of life in the Alaskan bush contrasted with the multi-gigawatt beam, which will rise from the desolate site. The high-energy beam could have global consequences, according to a few independent scientists. As if sensing that his companions in the wind-buffeted truck needed a hearty laugh, Nick told about a telephone call from a reporter for a major newspaper. Excuse me. From a major newspaper who had heard that Nick was researching HAARP. The reporter said he had talked to the people at E-Systems, the defense contracting corporation that bought APTI. And they had heard there were rumors in Alaska about black helicopters and aliens and black cars harassing people, guys being beat up by men in black. I said, it's funny you would hear those rumors in Washington, D.C., when I've never heard any of that in Alaska and I live here. I laughed at him. I wasn't going to feed into that. Nick shrugged off the memory of the reporter's attempt to elicit rural paranoia to, quote, he was playing games when I look back on it. When the reporter's article was printed, the Alaskan researchers were outraged to see what the leading scientists said. The rumors are buzzing across the internet that a Pentagon physics experiment on a wind-whipped tract of U.S. Air Force land in Alaska has a secret purpose: digging up bodies of UFO aliens. Another rumor has it that men in black suits are jumping out of black sedans to beat up Alaskan opponents on the project. Countering these odd speculations is all in a day's work for Ramy Shaney. And there's a note here. John Mintz, Pentagon fights secret scenario speculation over Alaskan antennas. Washington Post, April 17th, 1995, and then it says A3. Playing games, the phrase struck in Manning's mind. Is that what defense contractors and the military public relations men are doing? The PR man tells a reporter that, nah, we aren't going to do any ambiguous tests on the upper atmosphere, just some megawatt stuff. If the reporter digs a bit farther, however, he or she would find a paper from Penn State. For example, it shows a graph of the hierarchy of thresholds that increasing input of radio frequency, RF power, makes in the ionosphere. Heating comes first, then parametric instabilities and stimulated electromagnetic radiation. Pump in more RF power and you accelerate electrons until the air glows. The next threshold is shock fronts from stimulated ionization. The Penn State experimenters proudly say they don't know what will happen when the new super powerful HAARP instrument drives the effects past a new threshold. When the trio returned to Wally's home, his wife sat on the sofa with the weary look of a schoolteacher resting after a day in the classroom. 3 teenagers came in and joined her in front of a TV newscast. While Nick telephoned the local newspaper editor to ask for a photo of the HAARP site, Jean Ann asked Wally if the project was still controversial among local residents. He replied that many of his neighbors scattered through the Copper River Valley had attended public meetings earlier. They came forward one after another saying they were concerned. Then later, the HAARP organizers came out and said they'd addressed all of the concerns and started building the project. People still feel powerless. They half listened to Nick's conversation. Apparently, the local editor was quite impressed with the charming gentleman, the HAARP manager, and his associates. Wally rummaged through books on the table and found one, written in 1993 by science journalist Bill Sweetman, and there's a notation here. Bill Sweetman, Aurora, the Pentagon's secret hypersonic skyplane, Motor Books International, W1, 1993. Which one of the guys in the bush had passed on to him? Wally pointed to a section about a strange how-to lie manual and read aloud. The U.S. Air Force's credibility is further undermined by the fact that the Department of Defense explicitly authorizes the dissemination of misleading information in order to protect classified programs. In a supplement to the National Industrial Security Program Manual, released in draft form in March 1992, the DoD told contractors how to draft cover stories that must be believable and cannot reveal any information regarding the true nature of the contract. Wally pointed out that the next paragraph contained a comment by Stephen Aftergood of the Federation of American Scientists. Once we know that the DoD practices this type of deception, it becomes harder to discern what's for real and what is not. And there's a 69 and it says Ibid. Snapping the book shut, Wally said he was already suspicious of certain individuals who leave messages on internet files as if planting them for the gullible, and he distrusted Department of Defense public relations releases. Aftergood's comments only confirmed his gut feeling. What can a guy trust? Outside the window, the wind hammered at the log walls. The farewells were brief. And that's the end of that chapter. And then we'll continue on to part 2. Thank you for listening. I've been attacked the whole time I've been reading that, and since last night. Um, and so there it is. I have a few message for you. I'm talking to Spirit. Give me 1 minute. The people who are attacking me just now were Catherine Winnick and Elizabeth Olsen and Elon Musk. However, I do think, and I'm going to use his name as Victor Radcliffe. Victor went to meet Elizabeth. He's not interested in meeting me. I just want to put that out there. That's all been a sham. So whatever he tells you people, it's a lie. Anyway, here we're going to go. I'm not going to dwell on that. Last night, some of the card messages I got were purify your crystals. We're fighting energy, so the crystals need to be cleansed. Rinse them in water. Then you can do the smudge and sage and stuff. Or clean them with, salt water. And then here's the other. The Lord Shiva is involved in this program. And he says by the new moon of this coming October, all of us test subjects, without consent or without compensation, it will be stopped. So if you're out there suffering, not too unlike how I am, they say it will be stopped. The other thing that the Axiom can do for you people who I mentioned, they send out attachments. How they do it exactly in the 5D using electromagnetic weapons, they can put things on us so that when they hold their handheld devices, it activates. That's how they activate. It feels like somebody's pinching my vagina. Now, the reason why they do it is because you have CCTV cameras in your home. In your home, you feel like you can walk around naked, lay on the bed, and touch your private parts. And they get a big kick out of this, okay? So when you feel these sensations, you can ask the Axiom, please scan for attachments, okay? And it will. And you can also ask the Axiom to reduce, if you can hear like I can hear, and I'm supposed to explain how things sound, and you just don't want to hear the negative, they intrude in your thoughts negative things that, you're ugly, you'll never get anywhere, that person's going to fuck you over. Whatever it is for you, if you're planning projects, don't use this one, use this person, because they are trying to implement and put their people in power, okay? And some of you people I'm talking to are powerful people. If you don't want to hear that stuff, ask the Axiom to block out this. If you'll intuitively feel when it's a negative. We go through so much of the energy, you'll figure out the energy's good, the energy's bad. Ask the Axiom to filter out sound for you, to only hear the good stuff. Now, they want me to explain how angels sound and the ET guides sound. Angels sound like jingling bells, okay? There are people out there, like Sophie Hunter has learned how to emulate the sound of Michael. He has a very specific jingle, and angels sound like jingling bells. I have some that jingle on the left, and I have some that jingle on the right. And Michael's had to learn how to modulate his sound. Now we're all going through things with this. What happens up there, up and below that whole statement thing? It's real. Um, the ET guides sound like they'll sound like this, like they sound like guys who are talking through microphones. Sometimes they come out very clear, but they sound distant, right? The electromagnetic interference from the HAARP is what's distracting and distorting that communication. And these people sometimes, if they know, and they trust me, they know our minds are mapped to where I don't know if it breaks down into words or they can actually see as a picture form, pictographs like of what we're thinking. But they can see us, and then they see the physiological responses of when they tweak your nipples or stab you in the back or shoot you with energy weapons in here. They watch how you respond to it. We're test subjects without compensation. Now, and when you do your sonic resonance, like there's somebody out there who got DoorDash the other day. I heard their doorbell, and I heard DoorDash is here. Somebody in that room said, "Go ahead and answer it." So you can't say that's schizophrenia. I'm sorry. I'm actually picking up on people's phone calls and the sound within their home. Um, Now, the quantum entanglement sounds like if you've ever been a kid and did the science project of talking to somebody with tin cans and string. We had neighbors Lichtensteins. The back of their house faces the back of our house, and my brother and the son there were good friends, and they actually stretched and did the string experiment, and they were around the corner. They lived a block, like a half a block down around the corner, and they stretched string from the backyards and did the tin can thing, and that's how we sound quantumly entangled to each other. And all, of course, with the electromagnetic waves and stuff, they can distort, and you can't hear who's here. And then they like to pretend they listen, they record, and they can see how to emulate the sound of so and so. So everything is disturbed, and we're having a hard time keeping the communication clear. Then the other thing they want me to talk about is, and I have to say, some of you have to be highly intelligent and very educated. This will make sense to the educated. How people project. Sophie has a specific imagery and style that she likes, I almost hesitate because then she'll change her style. She's very soft. She'll pick out book images, and she likes like fairy tale cartoony stuff, and she affects people around her with that, right? And that imagery I know comes from her. Some people do like pencil drawings, and then they're projecting a storyline with pencil drawings. So each and every person projects their images differently, and then you can get to know whose style. And then the thing to remember, here's a helpful, even when you play, say you're playing World of Warcraft and you're watching chat, and the way people speak and converse is their diction, okay? Some people use words and some people don't use words, and the way they convey themselves in words, like for example, Sophie likes to pretend to be Benedict to me, and she has a very what I would call street language terminology, and Benedict conducts himself with words, and he'll be very succinct in what he says, and he'll use words that convey the meaning without a lot of extra other words. So the diction is a way to tell if your enemy is trying to be somebody you want to speak with. So that's about as all I can say, people. I hope you have a good rest of your Thursday. It's been a heinous battle. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of the deception. I'm tired of the storyline, and I can't wait for the court battle to be over. Remember, I think a lot of you are amazing, and some of you I absolutely do love. Be well now, people. Be kind to each other. Bye.